in-person touch that perhaps Jason will talk a little bit about. But yes, I think overall it was great. Overall, great community of scholars, and we were lucky enough in our cohort to have accountability partners. So that loneliness was kind of, subsided a little bit, because now at least you can connect with someone on a weekly basis, checking how they're going, how they're doing with their studies, but also just really emotionally. Because we started when COVID was a bit peak, so there was isolation, but also we lost a lot of touch, in-person touch with other scholars. So,
thanks so much, Penny. To you, Jason, how was it studying at Edinburgh? What did you study and what do you do currently? Is it related to what you studied? Just take us through.
Yeah. So as an on-campus scholar, the experience is very different because you go into a country where that's the first time you realize that you're actually a black person. So in our year we were about 42 of us. So for us, we didn't have an option. You have to have that community together. So the good thing, the way the scholarship was structured, we used to live in the same accommodation. So there was that connection that there was that bond that we were able to build. In terms of what I studied, so my master's was in climate change finance and investment. So looking at how do you bring in more capital into that space. For me, it wasn't that difficult because I had just come from. I'm from a consulting background, and what I used to do involved a lot working with that, with like fundraising for companies and working in that particular space. So for me, I can say the transition into like the academic life was a bit easier. But the only difference that came in terms of like how you structure stuff. So I'm an engineer as well. So coming from that scientific mindset and coming maybe from a business mindset into now an academic setting where you have to do certain references and all that. So that was the biggest change. But in terms of the content that I was studying, it was content that I was very familiar with. What do I do now? So I went back into consulting. So I work at Boston Consulting Group, people call it BCG. And I work in the energy and climate space. So essentially what I'm doing right now is what I studied. So there is that. That benefit.
Thank you so much. Interestingly enough, I also have an engineering background, so it's a team of I did biomedical engineering, so yay! Great, thank you so much, Jason, for sharing that. Femi, once you graduated, what was your first step like? When you graduated, how was that like getting into the market? You are in the market, but how was it like once you graduated?
Yeah, and I was just commenting this to differentiate that it wasn't really a transition because I was working already. I think a few things changed along the way. So I was working at Waneka Fund when I joined the University of Edinburgh. I was doing a lot of impact and strategy-oriented work, which was great. And I think along the way, I learned quite a bit of things from my course at Edinburgh that I could apply at Waneka Fund. Some not directly, but I found ways that I could leverage those skills to, transferable skills, so to speak, to apply in my job. And so during the time I studied at Edinburgh, well, from the time I joined up to the time I graduated, I worked with them. So I transitioned from Waneka Fund rather to the African Leadership Academy, which was quite a change because the African Leadership Academy is in the education space. I'm a trained agricultural engineer. I work with farmers. I know a lot about agriculture. And so this was a new space. But now, I think thinking back to some of the courses I did, like, politics and theory of international development, where you get to measure development, those kind of strengthened my skills around impact and strategy. And so when I transitioned to AA, mine was to kind of think about what are these transferable skills that I learned at Waneka Fund that were also strengthened by my training at Edinburgh that I could then leverage to enable my work at AA possible, right? So it was a different sector, but then I was looking at it like, a continuation of the work that I was doing, leveraging both what I learned at Waneka Fund and the experience I had from Waneka Fund and the training I had at Edinburgh. So it wasn't like a transition into the job market per se, but there's always transitions happening, and I think that's what I wanted to make clear, that even if you're working part-time or full-time now, you could always leverage skills to move into a different, completely different area, but being aware of like what really are your transferable skills, not losing sight of those, and knowing exactly how to apply them, regardless of where you are. You could be in agriculture. Now I'm in food banking. I work with food banks, which was new to me like 1 year ago, but I think it's the same philosophy that I carry, knowing what my intrinsic and core strengths are, but also what my transferable skills are. If you're good in data, for example, data analysis, if you're good in strategy, those will not go away. It doesn't matter if you're working with teachers or farmers, it will just stay the same. So being aware of that and not losing sight of those.
Thank you, Fanny. You mentioned about transferable skills, and I'm sure you picked many things as you're doing your study. What's that one thing you think that you still use in your day-to-day life or your career? One, two.
Yeah, it's really hard to think. I'd say like a personal, or should I call it an interpersonal skill, but resilience is one of those things that I always say that you must not lose, right? Whether you're working in an area that you're trained in or you're pivoting to another area, you must always, have that. So many things happen. Right now we are grappling with a lot of, lots of changes at the global level that perhaps when you look at it at face value don't really matter or don't really affect you so much, but when you really keenly look at how that impact is trickling down, it eventually affects how you think, how you behave, the economic situation, how tough things are for you, but also even for the clients you serve, right? So that's, as a professional, but most importantly as a person, right? Being resilient is something that I think has helped me, move through life, professional life and personal life. But the other thing that I've come to define for myself in my professional life is, it doesn't matter what field I find myself in. I know I want to be in agriculture and food systems for sure, right? But if I happen to move to education like I did when I was working at AA, I know that it has to be clear to me why I'm there. And for me, I've defined it as impact, right? So when I was working there, I knew that my role was contributing to developing the next generation of young African leaders. When I was at Waneka Farm, the impact looked like, helping farmers be more profitable. When I'm working with food banks now, the impact looks like helping food banks feed more people and preventing food loss and waste. So just knowing what is in it for me and how do I do it. So the goalpost should be fixed. Your strategy can change. You can, I want to move from here to that corner. I could go around, I could go straight, but yeah, that should be fixed. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. Great points. Jason, you were in work, then went to Edinburgh, then came back to consulting. How's that like for you? Transitioning to school, then after school, graduating now. How's that transition like for you?
It wasn't easy, especially if you are an on-campus scholar. I feel like our transition is a bit harder than for online scholars, because fine, going to Edinburgh was the easy bit. You have 1 year and living a job is not so difficult. You're going to another country, so your brain is excited. But then the 1 year goes by so fast, and now you get to a point where you now need to make a decision. Are you coming back to Africa, or are you looking for a job in Europe or in the UK? So for me, when I left Nairobi to Edinburgh, I knew I wanted to come back. The way, like, I want to come and build Africa. But the moment you land in Europe and then you realize the opportunities that are there, you now want to stay in Europe. And then so you start polishing up your CV, start applying for jobs. But then you realize Europe is changing right now. The political situation is changing. Guys are very anti-immigration, so companies don't want to hire immigrants. The threshold for hiring immigrants is a bit higher than hiring locals. So I applied to how many jobs. The last time I counted was about 92 jobs in the UK. Did about 5 interviews. You're very qualified, but the thing that knocks you out is you need a visa to work in the UK. Fine, you can take the graduate visa, but that takes you for 2 years. But then at the end of the 2 years, you need a company to actually sponsor your visa to continue staying in the country. And most companies don't want to do that. They'd rather hire a local than you because you are an added expense to them. So around June, that's when I was like, okay, things are not working out. And we said, what if I expand my horizon and I look for a job? So I saw an opportunity at BCG, took it, applied for it, and then I got an offer. So even before I boarded that plane to come to Europe, I was always thinking to hope. Like I remember even the day that I was boarding my flight, I actually sent an application that morning, just hoping to like something might open up, and I don't have to come back. So, but then I kept saying, you go where the opportunity or where the door opens. So the offer here in Europe wasn't so bad, and then that's why I came. So let me give you a perspective of the transition for an on-campus scholar. So there's that element, because once for the 1 year, the scholarship takes care of you, take care of your accommodation. You're a student, so you don't have to pay taxes. The UK, those guys pay a lot of taxes. But then at the end of August, that's when the stipend ends. So now you have to now cater for yourself. If you are staying in the UK, that means you need to get a job, you need to get an apartment, and the cost of living there is so high, so you need a job that actually takes care of your expenses and all that. And to make matters worse, if you have black tax, then that's even worse. So there's that element. And then for the guys that decide to come back, you now have to, guys always ask me, you went to UK, why are you coming back to Africa? Like you had a way out, and why are you coming back? So even in your head, there's always that doubt of when you're coming back, am I making the right choice? Will I regret this choice? Will I regret this decision? So there's always that mental conflict that you have trying to figure out to make the right decision. And yeah, I cannot tell guys that online students tend to have an easier transition than on-campus students, because there's a lot that you're dealing with, especially the last 2 months. There's a lot that you're dealing with.
Great. Yeah, something we didn't know about on campus. Thank you for sharing so comprehensively. Fanny, sometimes it looks also rosy. I was working, studying, and I was working. Did you make mistakes along the way, if any? And how was that like in your career path? Yeah, take us through any mistakes.
Yeah, perhaps I'd just like to highlight one thing I struggled with. So when COVID started, most employees started working remotely. That was the case with One as well. We started working remotely in March, and I think throughout that year, throughout 2020, it was such a steep learning curve for me, so to speak, because I hadn't worked remotely before. Like many people, not so many people had worked remotely before, and added to the fact